Usman. I'm the I lead Chicago Youth Opportunity Programs for the Obama Foundation, which primarily entails leading the My Brother's Keeper work here in the city. I'm joined by my colleague, but this is my colleague Bernal Holland. You'll hear a little bit more about him later. This is the My Brother's Keeper Alliance Community Challenge Competition TA session for the RFP that we launched about 3 weeks ago. This is part of a series of TA sessions that we've been doing. The vast majority of them have been online through the webinar format, but this is the first one that we're doing in person, and you'll learn a little bit more about why we're doing this in person later. And to give you a little bit more of a headline as to why, is because we already know that Chicago is one of the cities that we're going to be working in. It's the home to the Obama Foundation. It's a place where we're going to continue to make investments in the future. Just a little bit briefly about our agenda today. We're going to talk, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague who's going to give a little bit of the history of the My Brother's Keeper initiative, as well as the lead up to why we're launching this My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge competition. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the details. There are 2 opportunities in Chicago that I'm going to explain a little bit more about. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. I'll be very brief on the website because I know a lot of you that are here have already been on the website. But I will highlight a couple areas that I want you all to know. And then we really want the bulk of this to be a conversation. So we want to turn it over to you all to hear your questions and learn a little bit more about what are some things that you're wondering about as it relates to applying to the RFP. A lot of you signed a photo release, a recording release when you came in. It's because we are recording this webinar and we will post it on the website so that other folks that weren't able to attend can hear what took place today. We're trying to be very, very fair and transparent to everyone throughout this process. So as much as possible, questions that are asked, we're posting them on the website. Recordings of webinars are available to everyone. And then finally, we'll just do some quick tie-up at the end. So as part of our introductions, first want to acknowledge that we're here at the City Colleges of Chicago, and we're thankful for them for letting us use this wonderful conference space. Second thing is, part of what we wanted to do in bringing folks that are working on issues affecting boys and young men of color in the city is that a lot of you all have been doing this work for a very long time. The Obama Foundation is essentially a startup. So we wanted to bring you all together and allow you all an opportunity to learn from each other, introduce yourselves to each other. So I want to take a moment to do introductions, but it's really a turn and talk. I want you to go to someone else in the room that you haven't met before, tell them a little bit about your organization, learn a little bit about their organization, and hopefully at the end we'll realize that we're not alone in our communities doing this work, but we're actually all pulling in the same direction. So I want to take a couple moments to allow you to sort of interact with each other, learn a little bit more about each other. So we'll take 3 or 4 minutes to do that. Get up if you like to, go up to someone you haven't met before and introduce yourself. Yes, absolutely. Great, thank you. And now this is always the hard part, is interrupting great conversation. If I can get everyone's attention back together. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap once. You can hear the sound of my voice, clap twice. You can hear the sound of my voice, clap 3 times. All right, thank you so much. It's always hard to interrupt good conversation. I hope that was a helpful little introduction to sort of what we're trying to do here. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Bernal Holland, who's going to introduce himself and give you a little bit of the history of the My Brother's Keeper Alliance and a little bit about the launch of this competition.
All right, how's everybody doing? All right, so as Jaime said, I'm Bernal Holland. I'm on the Obama Foundation team, specifically with the MBK Alliance, and I do a lot of our place-based work where we're doing My Brother's Keeper all throughout the country, 250 communities, cities, counties, tribal nations, and we're going deep in a few communities, and that will be outlined definitely in the communities that receive grants as part of this process. So I and a few colleagues work on that area of the foundation specifically. So when we start off, any presentation related to the MBK Community Challenge competition, we've started at our origin story. And I think most of the folks in this room know that the impetus for launching My Brother's Keeper in the White House came in the wake of the tragic death of Trayvon Martin. MBK is a few years old now. We're about a little over 4 years away from the initial launch of the White House initiative, but we always want to pay homage to where this work started, and remember this started, with the promise and future of a young man being wiped out, and that's the type of outcome that we're all trying to avoid here. So I think many of us were touched when the president made a statement shortly after the verdict that 35 years ago Trayvon Martin could have been him, and I think that shared his spirit, his commitment to the work, and that still reigns true today. So MBK is rooted in data and research that was all a part of the task force findings initially, and but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through sort of the why of the work. Each of you do this work every single day. You know these data points, you know the reasons why the work of My Brother's Keeper is so essential to making sure that our young men have positive futures. So opportunity is the real reason why we're here. How do we make sure that the gateway to opportunity in this country is available to all? And that's really at the basis of the work that we're all trying to do related to My Brother's Keeper. Here you see a few data points related to if we were to close the educational attainment gap, or if we were to close the labor force participation gap between young men of color or working age men of color and non-Hispanic white men, that there would be a dramatic impact on GDP. Another way of saying that is that when boys and young men of color are given an opportunity to reach their full potential, America is in a better place to reach its full potential. And when our country is not granting real opportunities to all of our young people, we're not as strong as we can be. So, as most of you know, the work of MBK started with a cradle to career framework that still exists today. And the MBK Community Challenge, the initial MBK Community Challenge that started inside the White House, consisted of these 4 steps. And you've heard me reference, you've heard Jaime reference, you hear anyone who talks about My Brother's Keeper talk about the full network of 250 communities. Every single community is at a different place on the spectrum related to how deep they went with this challenge, and how consistent they've been with following that framework. But it is incredibly important to us, and it's woven into the RFP, which many of you have read. But accepting the challenge would be number 1, and then convening a local action summit, conducting a policy review and policy scan, and then developing a local action plan. And so I just wanted to set that context here. That's a little bit of a story of sort of what happened during the White House days of MBK. About a year and a half after the launch of the initiative in February 14, in the spring of 15, there was the launch of the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, a separate 501c3 organization that was developed to support the work of MBK even after the conclusion of the Obama administration. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, Jaime and I both come from that separate 501c3, which at the end of 2017 became fully integrated into the Obama Foundation, which was then another very big and public statement about the former president and Mrs. Obama's commitment to this work long term. We also got a very clear guidance and steer from the president that he wanted our team to focus very specifically on building safe and supportive communities for boys and young men of color where they feel valued. And that is the basis of our reframe strategy that I'll talk about a little bit in the coming slides. And the very first piece of that strategy manifests itself in the work of the MBK Community Challenge competition. And we really wanted to make sure that in this work, we're focusing very deeply on the work of mentoring and expanding mentoring opportunities for boys and young men of color, closing waiting lists, and also making sure that we are advancing the work of youth violence reduction across this country. All right. And so this is the strategic frame that I briefly just touched on. And there are 3 main buckets to the work of the MBK Alliance. Accelerating impact in targeted communities is the very first bucket, and where the majority of the work of the MBK Community Challenge competition sits. We want to make sure this work is real, this work has momentum, is resourced and supported in local communities that can then develop into real proof points as to how we can set a blueprint and expanded opportunity throughout the rest of the nation. Second bucket is want to strengthen the MBK network that I've referenced and continue to promote what works. As I said, there are varying stages to where each MBK community is at with the implementation of their work. We want to make sure that folks know that there are other people doing that work every single day that they can turn to, that there are other organizations that are here to support them and push their work forward, and give them very clear recommendations for evidence-based strategies that have helped propel young men forward. So, and then the third bucket will be mobilizing citizens and resources. As you can imagine, we have a very big platform. And with that comes responsibility of making sure that people all throughout this nation know about the work of MBK. If they have a chance to contribute to it in various ways, that we're playing the role of calling people in and putting out continual calls to action to make sure that folks are part of this work in multiple levels. So you may see an example of sort of that bucket at the end. If we can work out a minor technical issue, we'll show a PSA that launched on Christmas Day 2017 called We Are the Ones. So that's a little bit of a overview of sort of where MBK started, where it has come in the last few years, which has led us to the Community Challenge competition. I'm going to turn it over to Jaime to get into the details.
Great. Thanks, Brunel. Great. So we are launching into the Community Challenge competition, which launched in early last month. Again, the purpose of the RFP is really to identify and really invest in up to 12 communities that are really that have accepted the My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge and making an investment to help support their work around mentorship and violence prevention. This is part of that first bucket of strategy, accelerating change in targeted communities. We do want to be targeted in that work while also recognizing that there is a broader group of 250 communities that we're going to continue to work through strengthening the network as well. But our focus areas for this are both reducing youth violence and increasing mentorship opportunities for young people. Just really briefly on both of those, there's a definition in your RFP, so please go there and learn a little bit more. But we're taking broad definitions on both of those. We're not requiring on the mentorship side that they be in-school mentoring, out-of-school mentoring, one-on-one mentoring, et cetera. We're allowing you all to tell us what works in your communities. Similarly, with violence prevention, we're taking a broad view on violence prevention. There are folks that are doing prevention efforts, interruption efforts, trauma-informed care. We're taking a broad view of what that looks like. So we want you to tell us what's working in your community so that we can take that and allow it to inform our investment strategy for what's happening. The thing that's important to note as well is that we do want there to be a strong evidence base for the work. And again, in a similar way, we're allowing you all to point to that evidence base for your work that's allowing you to recognize that there's impact on young people, right? We're going to work with the cohort of folks over time to make sure that we're being able to tell a story across what's happening in different sites that we're working in, but we're allowing you all to come and tell us what is the evidence base for the work that you're doing. We do want it to be rigorous, but we do recognize that not everyone has, full team of data scientists on your team. So we're allowing you all to come to us with your community generated quantitative and qualitative data, right? A note on Chicago and California, the RFP did call out these two specific areas as places that we'll be investing in. We will have a national competitive process for the impact grants. That is the general application link on the website. Anyone that's applying in Chicago, we're asking you to either pick whether you're applying for a Chicago impact grant or a Chicago seed grant. And the reason why we're doing that is a couple different things. Nationally, we're going to have a national competition where we're going to be selecting those communities that we're working in. In Chicago, we already know that we're going to be working in Chicago. Chicago is the future home of the Obama Presidential Center. It's where the foundation is headquartered. The president got his start organizing here. He's from this community. So we're going to make a continued commitment to Chicago. But we will have a competitive process for Chicago impact grants. And this is the grant that is the larger size grant, up to $500,000. This is for an organization that serves as a backbone that can help, both convene folks to do this work jointly, that can help set a table, that can help drive the work together, that is on the ground doing work with folks. So serving a variety of different purposes, right? So we recognize that we're going to have a competitive process for Chicago impact grants. We also have Chicago seed grants, which are meant to be those smaller community embedded emerging organizations that are doing work on the ground. They're not a backbone, but they're doing really valuable work that we'll be investing between 4 to 8 smaller seed grants in the size of $25,000 to $50,000 to those organizations that are doing that kind of work. So Chicago is the only city where you can actually apply for a seed grant. There will be other cities that nationally apply to the competition and receive seed funding as a way to sort of keep them seed their work and continue it going. Chicago, as a community that we're investing in, will receive an impact grant as well as up to 8 seed grants as well. So it's a community that we're making a sizable investment in, and there's a reason why we're doing that. Impact grant organizational eligibility. So I will briefly go into some of these. Again, Chicago is a city that we're already working in, so it is one of the 250 cities that did answer the president's call and is a My Brother's Keeper Challenge community. Organizations that we're looking for do have to be 501c3s. They do have to be in existence for over 3 years, They do have to have an annual operating budget of $750,000 or more for the impact grants. Have a strong track record of actually doing work with boys and young men of color on the ground. So folks that haven't done this work before, this is probably not the right opportunity for folks that haven't done substantive work in mentorship or violence prevention before, specifically focused on boys and men of color, and have a strong track record of managing that data. We do want this to be a competitive and rigorous process. And we also want this work to be sustainable over time. So for those organizations that are applying as impact grants, we are asking for a 1-to-1 match. So the $500,000 that we're providing, we want that to generate another $500,000 to support the work, right? And this could be, public funds, private funds. We don't have a restriction. It does have to be cash. We're not allowing in-kind donations to count toward the match. And then we also do want it to be this fiscal year. So funds that you received last year that you're sort of bringing over to this fiscal year to count for that work. We do want this investment to generate some new funds, but we also recognize that depending on where you are, you might have some funds for expansion that we want to really tap into for that. And then the final piece is we do want the work to be aligned with the work that's already been done in cities, communities across the country. So we are asking for organizations that are applying as an impact grant to get a letter of endorsement or support from their local mayor's office. So here in Chicago, that would be the mayor's office. We actually have Juan Gonzalez from the mayor's office here, who's the point on My Brother's Keeper. I don't know if you want to stand up and wave. We're working really closely on this with the mayor's office as well. You heard a little bit about some of the work that's been done in the past. There have been some phenomenal things across the city that have been done for boys and young men of color in the recent years. There's a My Brother's Keeper cabinet that was launched a couple years ago. There's been work around expanding the mayor's mentoring initiative, One Summer Chicago, expanding the Becoming a Man program. Those are some examples of things that have been done in the city. I think we're going to continue to work in collaboration with the mayor's office as well as partners on the ground to continue to support that field of work so that when we're awarding these funds close to the end of the year, we have a playbook and we're all pulling in the same direction for boys and young men of color. So more to come on that, and that's part of some of the work that I'm doing on the My Brother's Keeper, but in terms of the My Brother's Keeper work in Chicago. But this is sort of the blueprint for impact grant organization eligibility. And again, if there are questions, we can sort of get to them at the end. Again, we're going to be awarding up to 7 impact communities nationally, which will make up our cohort of impact communities that we're working with over the next couple of years. So Chicago, along with 6 other communities, tribal nations, counties, et cetera, that also are winners in the competition, will be able to come together regularly over time to sort of share ideas, learn about what's happening in other cities, share best practices. In terms of the work, we're also providing some human resource funds on the ground. So we're providing $50,000 to $75,000 a year for a My Brother's Keeper communities coordinator that can help do some of that convening and support. That is also in addition to the $500,000 and does require a 1-to-1 match. So that's a $100,000 to $150,000 position that can help support some of the work on the ground. And then in terms of engagement and support, the My Brother's Keeper communities team, myself here in Chicago, as well as Burnell nationally, will be doing some work to support the cohort over time. And we'll be leveraging the support of our national partners to help support some of the work happening on the ground. So whether it's Cities United around violence prevention efforts, or whether it's Mentor National around some of the mentorship work that's happening on the ground, we'll be able to leverage some of those supports to support both work targeted happening on the ground as well as with the cohort itself. Moving on to Chicago seed grant eligibility. These are those smaller, emerging, community-embedded organizations that are doing work on the ground. There are some differences in eligibility from the impact grant. So we recognize that these smaller groups need to be able to implement the work on the ground in a way that's a little more community embedded. Some of these may be smaller organizations, may be emerging organizations. So we have a couple of different requirements for this. So instead of a $750,000 floor, we have a $250,000 floor for organizations that are applying. If the organization has been around for fewer than 3 years, which may be the case for some organizations, we are allowing in Chicago seed grant applications for you all to come in with a fiscal sponsor, an organization that has been around for greater than 3 years and has a $250,000 budget or more, to be able to come in as a fiscal sponsor to help support those smaller emerging organizations. We do ask that when you submit that documentation, though, it be for both organizations so that we can make sure that we're investing in a place that's safe and going to be sustainable, et cetera. These smaller grants, we're also additional requirements. We are not requiring for seed grants a letter of endorsement or support from the mayor's office, okay? And then in terms of what those up to 4 to 8 seed grants will entail, those are $25,000 to $50,000 to support, again, evidence-based programs supporting boys and young men of color in the mentorship or violence prevention space. They can also be some of those emerging, innovative practices around supporting boys and young men of color, as long as there's a strong evidence base to support that. So those are the two broad lanes that are available for Chicago. And again, part of what I want to highlight is that Chicago is the only city where you can apply for seed grants, and the only city in the country where we're doing multiple seed grants in the city. And again, that's part of our commitment to making sure that we're supporting work, not just at the sort of collective impact level across the city, but also what's happening in the neighborhoods across the city on the ground. So I talked a little bit about the match. We do require that to be cash, dollar for dollar. Growing the impact of program models. We are looking for program models that are expanding, that are replicating, that are going to another geographic community in the city. So we're looking to really increase the footprint of organizations that are serving boys and young men of color. This is not for, I need operating funds for my existing program that has existed and will continue to exist in the same way. This is for expansion, replication, geographic expansion, expanding the numbers of young people served. Systems change. This is a grant program that is essentially for 2 years. This is not collective impact in the way that collective impact is known today, but we do see this as a base on which we can build collective impact efforts for My Brother's Keeper work into the future, right? So we do see this as a variety of different people pulling in the same direction. In Chicago, we may have up to 9 organizations that have received funding from us to do this work. That is starting to feel like a movement that we can help support and is working together to support boys and young men of color. So I just want to acknowledge that we are looking for that, collective impact system change kind of mindset for folks that are applying for these grants. Evidence and evaluation, we're going to select organizations that do have a track record for their work. Again, we want you all to come with your community generated data, quantitative and qualitative. We are looking for that strong evidence base for that work. And then I mentioned a little bit about collective impact in the system change section, but we do want this to be leading towards that collective impact work. And then just a final thing that I'll say about target beneficiaries. The work of My Brother's Keeper Alliance was really launched to support boys and young men of color. We've gotten some questions about, young women in mentorship programs, or what happens if we have a variety of different, Black, brown, Asian Pacific Islander, et cetera. We recognize that the challenges of boys and young men of color can't be solved unless we have other people at the table. So that includes, addressing the needs of LGBT youth. That includes the needs of other folks at the table. So we are encouraging folks to, when you have programs that serve a diverse constituency, that you put that in the context of this intersectional lens for the work that we're doing. We can't solve the problems of boys and young men of color until we also look at the problems that young people are facing across the city. So we just want to acknowledge that while boys and young men of color are our primary constituency, we recognize that there are ways that you all can serve broader populations as well as boys and men of color, as long as it's put in context. Quick piece around the community competition timeline. As you see bolded in red is our deadline submission. That is a hard submission timeline and date. Thursday, May 24th at 5 p.m. We've had several webinars and TA sessions already. All of those have been recorded and are available online. I'll show you where they are a little bit later. We're also having this in-person session. We're gonna have a final webinar next week, to sort of go over the final questions and answers. We also have, so we'll be doing our reviews over the course of the summer. We'll be announcing competition winners close to the end of the summer in the fall, and then funds dispersed sometime in the fall of 2018, okay? I'll pause there and see, Brunel, if I missed anything, because I also need to drink some water. Great. So I'm going to go a little bit into the website. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the actual slides, but I will show you a couple things that I want you all to look at on the website. So a lot of you have been here. This is our landing page. Again, there are a variety of different places where you can go. Everyone in this room that is applying in Chicago should either be applying for a Chicago Impact Grant or a Chicago Seed Grant. okay? Just want to say that up front. Registration, confirmation emails, if you forgot your password. This is where the general application is. I'm actually going to show you a couple of different places where I want us to look. So this is the community competition page. If you want to look at the whole RFP, there's a link right here, read the entire request for proposals, that has the entire RFP. So we've gotten some questions in the FAQ. Where can I print up the entire RFP? Is there a PDF? You can print this page and this will have the entirety of the RFP all on one page for those of you that need a paper copy of it. If you look on the right, you can have you have a link to a Chicago impact application, a link to a Chicago seed application, and then general Chicago application details. Those are all useful pieces of information for you all to go to if you need some information about where is the information on Chicago. I click on that. Impact applicant information, seed applicant information, seed grant applications in Chicago. All the information that was presented in this PowerPoint is available on the RFP website as well, okay? So we have all the information here, size of operating budget, everything that I said is also on the website. Technical assistance webinars. Here is where you'll have all of the webinars that we've conducted. So April 10th, we held a general webinar. Watch the webinar, view the presentation. We have links available. We've had webinars on collective impact. So with some of our partners that are doing collective impact work. We've had a webinar specifically on mentoring. We've had a webinar specifically on violence prevention that was presented by some of our partners at Cities United. We've had a webinar on data measurement and evaluation that was done by our friends at the Crime Lab, Results for America, and Mentor. Okay, so those of you that have questions about that, I encourage you to go to these webinars, watch them. There was a lot of useful information that was presented that can help inform your application, specifically around these issue areas that are going to be important for the application. We will have a final webinar online next week. You can register here for the webinar, sign up. They're very much like this. We'll accept online. We're actually recording this on the online format that will be presented, so you can watch this later on as well. So just wanted to highlight where we provided some very transparent information on webinars that have already presented. There is nothing that we're presenting publicly that you won't have access to, okay? And then the final piece of it is frequently asked questions. Provided a space here for frequently asked questions. We started with a series of frequently asked questions that we anticipated. We have been receiving through, many of you have been sending questions to us through the contact us type form on the website. So a lot of you have submitted a question here, asked a question. Those are being received by our staff, and we're in the process of answering all of those questions, responding individually to people that have asked those questions, and then afterwards posting a public version of the question and the answer on this website. So this frequently asked question page is increasing in terms of the number of questions that are being posted and answers that are being posted again, so that no one is getting information that is not publicly available to everyone that's seeking information about the about frequently asked questions as it relates to this RFP. So you'll have questions on eligibility, you'll have questions on programmatic elements, a variety of different topics. So we're up to 49 questions. There's, as I said, we have probably about 30 or 40 other active questions that our staff are in the process of answering right now and then posting on the website. So you'll be getting, in as real time as possible, answers to FAQs. After the session next week, we'll do everything possible to post all of the answers to questions that have been asked through that question and answer period within a week of that. So by the 17th of May, all questions will be answered on this website. Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions because we're actually almost at the T&A section. And I just recognize that there are some folks that may have asked questions and have not yet received answers. That just means that they're in the queue, right? And we'll get to them. You'll get a personal response, and then the public answer will be posted. Okay. So I'm going to ask Brunel to come up and join me, and we're going to go ahead and take your questions. So Jonathan is in the back, and he has a mic. So if anyone wants to ask a question verbally, you can stand up. Jonathan will run to you. You can ask the question. We'll likely restate the question up here for the purpose of the webinar as well. And then those of you that have question cards, you can write a question, hand it to Jonathan. We'll make sure that those are included on the FAQ as well. If you just want an answer to be posted and not necessarily ask it in the public session. So please raise your hand if you have a question. And Deborah, I saw Deborah had a question right here. Jonathan, do you want to go here? And then we'll go to Von Dale.
I'm just wondering the general application versus the impact application versus the seed application. You're supposed to fill out always the general application plus the other one?
No, the general application is for people applying to impact grants everywhere outside of Chicago.
Thanks, Simon. My question is, like, what does the ongoing support look like from a cohort perspective? So let's say an organization becomes a backbone organization that's chosen. Will those, like Chicago seed grant awardees, work in conjunction with the backbone organizations in basketball? And how would that support look?
Yeah, I'll take the second part and then I'll hand it over to Burnell so the Chicago Seed Grant awardees, as well as the Chicago Backbone, it's almost like a cohort within a cohort. So Chicago Seed Grant awardees will be part of the broader cohort, but there will also be essentially a Chicago cohort that we'll be doing some additional convenings with, et cetera. But Burnell will give you a little bit of the highlight of what's happening with the broad cohort of folks that are doing this work.
It's a great question because we definitely intend for each of the communities that receive awards to be in community with each other and learning from each other because they're going to be struggling with similar challenges. So we have a series of meetings that we've done regionally and nationally as the MBK Alliance. That type of convening will continue. And when those things occur, we will be bringing the full cohort of the Community Challenge Competition grant awardees into those national and regional MBK community convenings. So that'll be a place where folks can actually meet face to face. Additionally, as Jaime referenced in one of the earlier slides, there are matching funds for a staffer, right? So the coordinator position, those folks will actually be working together as well. So there's going to be, for each of the impact awardees, there'll be a community coordinator in place. And our expectation is that those folks will be coming together to get some PD and support and learning from each other individually, as well as more broader convenings from the full cohort. The other piece that's important to mention is that as part of the award, in addition to the actual cash award, there is a robust set of technical assistance that will be ongoing from our national partners, right? We know that we don't have all the answers on the MBK Alliance staff, but we sure as heck believe that we can get in touch with folks throughout the nation that are experts in each of the challenge areas that folks in the cohort will be dealing with. So, and that type of support is coming at our dime as well. So that's not cutting into the awards that are received by Backbone organization, if that makes sense. So there'll be a lot of ways that we continue to support that cohort.
Saquon, and then in the back.
Just a couple questions. One, I'm curious about how the communities were chosen. I find it went by quick, so I didn't see a lot of West Side communities.
Yeah, there are no communities that have been chosen specifically for this grant. We did, because the Presidential Center is going to be located on the South Side, we wanted to make sure that we were inviting applications on the South Side, but we invite applications from across the city as well. So we don't specifically, we have not chosen communities that we're working in yet, but we figured we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that the Presidential Center is going to be on the South Side. We encourage applications from those areas, but we encourage applications from across the city.
I just want to provide some feedback. I would suggest, though, to think that because when we read it, it's something like this, it's a hierarchy.
Okay.
In the priority, just in way feedback.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great, appreciate it.
And then
Who's that answer to number 49? Specifically says
well, that's what I'm talking about. So, but I understand.
Yeah.
I understand the feedback. I think it's suggested as a hierarchy and a preference.
We can clarify. Yeah, we can clarify that we're inviting applications from across the city, but I do want to acknowledge that we are inviting applications from the South Side, especially in the areas immediately around the Presidential Center.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And so, and then my other question has to do with Cities United.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, my understanding, they're not really, they don't have, there's no real presence here, unless I'm mistaken. The Cities United, because I was part of road application for the city. And I was excited about connecting and working with Cities United, and it didn't happen. And so I guess my question is, what is the status of that? Is it going to be a reimagining or reintroduction of Cities United in this market?
Yeah, I mean,
it's important.
I'll let Burnell speak to the collaboration that we have with Cities United. I can't speak to what's happened in the past around collaboration with Cities United, but I can tell you about what our partnership and relationship is with them, and we've been working very closely with them.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, great question. What I can say confidently is that Cities United will be a part of that cohort of national organizations that I just referenced that will be pulling in to provide technical assistance to each of the impact grant winners. We know that Chicago is going to have an impact winner and going to have a backbone organization as a part of the cohort. So Cities United will be working with whichever organization is selected as the backbone here in Chicago. That will happen.
It'll be a local, Chicago will have, it will be at the table of the national table. The Cities United, you know what I'm saying? Because we had it disbanded. We really didn't get off the ground in all honesty.
So how it looks in terms of local sort of day-to-day presence versus frequent support from national staff from Cities United, that's a TBD. I can't say for sure whether it be one way or the other, but they are at the table. They will be a partner with us, and they will be working with Chicago through this competition.
Hi, I have a question about the fiscal agent. As far as organizations who have not been in existence or 3 years or less. So does that mean, because I have a 501c3 here and it's about 3 years old. We have funding from Boeing and we have some other funders. But as far as like for organizations who are really like grassroots organizations, it really wipes us out of the picture with the $250,000 threshold. So I'm trying to find out as far as like with the fiscal agent, are we sharing those funds with that fiscal agent, or how is the makeup of that?
Yep, that's a great question. The question, just to restate it, is for organizations that are seeking a fiscal agent, like how does that process work? Basically the first thing I'll say is that Chicago seed grant applications are the only ones that we're allowing to have fiscal agents, because we recognize that some organizations may have been around for less than 3 years, may not have the budget of $250,000. The way that fiscal agent relationships typically work is that there is another organization that is larger, has been around longer, et cetera, that there's a formal memorandum of understanding or agreement partnership with. That is up to the applying organization and the partner organization to work together on. We'll be receiving information from both of those. We'll be establishing a grant agreement with the fiscal agent so that those funds flow directly to the fiscal agent. And then the dollars will then flow based on the agreement between the applying organization as well as the fiscal agent to the organization. There is typically a percentage chargeback from organizations that are serving as fiscal agents. That is part of what the applying organization and the fiscal agent need to negotiate as part of that MOU or contract, right? But we're going to be evaluating both organizations based on their fiscal soundness, et cetera. But for example, if your organization focuses on mentorship and or violence prevention and the other organization does not, clearly you're the organization that's going to be doing the work and you're going to be the organization that is the lead applicant. But because of the requirements around the seed grant, we're working directly and creating a grant agreement directly with the other organizations. Does that sort of clarify things around the fiscal agent piece? Jonathan, there was a question in the back and then we're going to come back over here.
Do seed grant applicants need a match as well?
Seed grant applicants do need a match for the $25,000 to $50,000, yes. Over here in the back and then over here and then over here. Oh, no, in the back here.
Speaking further about the cash match, is there, Cheryl Holman, Community Assistance Program, is there a restriction on what funds can be used? We have a lot of government funds. Sometimes they have restrictions on what can be used for a cash match. And in that vein, can I use, let's say, for example, I have a staff person that works on this part of the needs of the youth, and then on this part, you're working on that. Would that be considered?
I'm not sure I understood the second part of it, but to your first part around what kinds of funds can be used for a cash match, yes, we are allowing public funds to be used for a cash match. We're just not allowing in-kind or pro bono funds to be used for a cash match. And the second question, second part?
An example of what you consider to be a cash match. In my budget, I'm thinking budget.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a staff person, mentor, and they're working on, say, the employment part of working with the youth. Also,
I would say if they're part of the program budget that you submit, that is part of what we would count as part of the program. So anything that matches that would count toward that. Over here.
Same line of questioning.
Yep.
Hi, same line of questioning. So just to be clear, so it's crystal clear. If you I haven't looked at the budget. There's a budget form.
There is a budget form.
So in seed grant match, if we have a budget of 4 million, we can pull out and say, this is how we're going to match it. So for example, we have an existing program and we want to add a mentor program to it, right? So then would the budget for that program be we can use that as part of the match, even if it's corporate, individual giving,
yep,
public?
I would say if you're asking for funding for the expansion, I would have the program budget that funds that part of it. I would submit the program budget that funds the expansion to this grant application. And then the matching funds would be for the expansion. Does that make sense?
Yes. Not so crystal, but
okay. We can chat afterwards too.
Sounds like you need to have funds towards expansion, and then you're also applying funds with you guys for expansion.
Correct. So our funds for expansion shouldn't be the only funds for expansion that you're getting. Yes. So if you have like some money and then you might need to make up the difference for the match. If you're looking for new money from us, you need to find new money to match our new money. Does that make sense? Okay.
You mean like holding a fundraiser event specifically?
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Yeah. Cash is cash.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. Jonathan's only one person, so I want to make sure that we have a lineup here. There's one question here, and then one question here, and then, sorry, you've been asking for a while. Jonathan, this young lady right here was first, and then over there, and then over here, and then over here.
All right, I'm going back to the match question again.
Sure.
Just in the letters from funders that we're submitting then, so this is like if we have funding that's already supporting the program, like we're not having to go and reach out to new funders and request new money to match this should we get rewarded. That's what I'm trying to clarify. I understand that the idea is then we would leverage this and bring in more, but at the time of the application, like we need to preemptively get people to say they would match additional funding.
At the time of the application, we're asking for either hard or soft commitments for at least half the funding, and then the rest can come in afterwards.
Yes, but again, it's like new funding, not funding that we've already brought in.
It could be funding that you've already brought in this fiscal year for that program specifically. Does that make sense?
I know we keep asking kind of the same
No,
thing.
that's,
I just want to be
yes.
crystal clear. And I actually have another question, so I'm going to keep this for a second. But so I've been looking at the C grant application, and there's still like in the attachments, there's still the requirement for the letter from the mayor. And
Yes, we are. Yes, there were a couple of questions in the seed application that we've gotten questions about through the FAQ. One of them was a letter for the mayor, so we're not requiring a letter from the mayor. And then another one is around the MBK community coordinator position. We're taking that question out because that is only applicable to the Chicago impact application.
Okay, and then the key collaborative partner letter?
Yeah, so I think for that, I think it's great to show that you have a key collaborative partner. We're not going to make that a requirement.
Okay, and then one more, the MBK local action plan.
Yes, so that is something that, again, we're not requiring for here in Chicago. I think if your organization has a local action plan, please attach it, but we recognize that there's not one sort of public one for the city.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
How do we get that? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great. Go ahead, Bruno.
Yeah, just to be even more clear, Jaime's making a point. We actually caught these flags within the last day or so, and the changes have been put to our webmaster, which haven't showed up yet. So those are coming down. The requirement button is coming down.
I have a question. How do you define the communities? You mentioned about the 12 communities will be founded. You define the community by racial ethnicity or by geographic area or by all the men award. So how do you define that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we're defining communities are the way that the My Brother's Keeper initiative was originally rolled out. And it was typically geographic. So it was heads of cities, heads of towns, heads of municipalities, heads of county seats, tribal nation leaders, etc. So for this competition, our community is Chicago writ large, right? So that is our community. So it's the community of Chicago is the My Brother's Keeper community here that we're working in.
But the communities in Chicago, but in Chicago you have a lot of communities,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, so
The 7 you say you will found the 12, let's say 12 communities.
right.
And
So
Chicago is only one community.
Yep.
But these 12 communities will be within the boundary of Chicago.
So when we're saying up to 12 communities, we're counting the communities across the country that we're funding through the competition. Chicago will be one of those communities that is chosen. In Chicago, we're also giving one impact grant and up to 8 seed grants. The up to 8 seed grants could be in multiple communities across the city. The impact grant could be working in multiple communities across the city. So when we say community as part of the My Brothers, up to 12 communities as part of the My Brothers Keeper Community Challenge, we're talking about winning city municipality applications. When we're talking about the Chicago communities that will be served by the grant, we're talking about the Chicago Impact Grant and the 4 to 8 seed grants that will be awarded in the city that could be working in multiple cities across Chicago. We haven't selected those communities yet. Those are going to come through the competition, and that's what we're going to be selecting. Does that answer your question?
So then which means that you have one impact, one community for impact grant, which is in Chicago.
We have one organization
Yeah.
that's going to receive impact grants in Chicago that could be working across the city.
Yeah, but for seed grant, you will provide funding for multiple communities within the Chicago, right?
Yes, for seed grants, we'll be providing funding to organizations in Chicago that are community embedded, that might be working in one particular community, might be working in 2 or 3 different communities, etc.
I see. The other question is, this is for people of color. Would Asian population considered included as a people of color here?
Absolutely. African American, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then over here.
Hi, my name is Sylvester Boyd, and I would like to know what would be a good on-ramp for an individual who has come from public housing and has gone through many of the changes the young men face on the streets today, and they travel all over the world. I'm a TV background actor. I'm also an author. I have 2 books out and working on a 3rd book, and I would like to know how would I be a part of your program.
Yeah. So let me just be, because I like to be fully transparent, let me just say I don't have a very good answer for you, but a couple things I would say is through the competition, there's obviously going to be strengthening of the MBK work here in the city of Chicago, which will create, 4 to 8 organizations that will be doing work in individual communities here throughout the city, and a backbone organization where there'll be opportunities to engage with those organizations. Generally speaking, when folks want to engage with My Brother's Keeper, one of the biggest activations that we point people to is the work that was referenced in our We Are the Ones PSA, driving folks to be mentors in the cities that they come from. And you can access that through imbk.org. And so the website, you just type imbk.org in on your phone or computer, and it'll basically give you a chance to type in your zip code, information about where you live, and it'll provide a list of organizations that are doing mentoring work and MBK work around you that you can engage with. So that's one way an individual can get connected in. And, again, I know it's not a perfect answer for this setting. This is more about the competition and organizations looking for guidance around the grant, but I can certainly chat with you a little bit more afterwards to talk about this further.
One over here, and then over in the by the wall. And we have about half an hour left, so I just want to let folks know. We're going to save the last 5 minutes just for some quick tie-up.
Yes, question and budget. Is there somewhere where it specifies what items you're willing to cover for expenses and what items should not be in your budget?
There's a full budget template attached to the website, so I encourage you to go in there. If there's a specific question around the budget template, you can feel free to submit it on the type form, and we'll answer it as best as we can in a transparent way.
Hi, the webinar on collective impact was really useful to help thinking about, a great quote was the health of the system. Would it be possible for you to elaborate on the MBK coordinator role as it relates to program expansion and collective impact in terms of sketching out whatever detail you might be able to offer for that FTE?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is around what role the My Brother's Keeper community coordinator position will have on sort of ensuring that the collective impact, sort of strategy will take hold. I think you are 100% right to call that role out as one that is crucial. I think it's less important for me to define what that role looks like, and I think more important for your organizations, especially those of you that are thinking of applying as impact grants, to think about what unique role you think you can play within that realm. And I'll give a couple of different examples, right? So there could be an organization that is a large direct service organization that is looking to do work as a backbone in Chicago. We want to encourage that, but we recognize that that organization may need some support from the community coordinator position to bring in organizations that are doing more collective impact work and sort of supplement that part of what they're doing, right? Conversely, there could be an organization that does less direct service work and more convening and collective impact work that may use that community coordinator position to reach out to direct service organizations to help set a table that can drive that work forward. So I think what we're looking to do as part of building that healthy ecosystem is think about your organization. If you're applying for an impact grant, think about what role you think you can play, and think about what role this fairly mid-level to senior position will play in being able to help ensure that your organization is best positioned to serve that backbone role and set the right table to start to move this work forward.
And the only thing I would add here is that that's actually a specific question in the RFP. So that's something that each of your organizations will have to think about and submit as part of your final application. So we don't want to get too deep into specifics. We don't want to steer people in a certain way, but yeah, you will have to dig in on that on your application.
Over here.
Hi, thanks. It's actually kind of a two-parter. We're planning on a seed grant. We've been approached by someone about being on an impact grant. Are we allowed to be on somebody else's impact grant and do a seed grant application on our own?
That is a great question that I had not anticipated. So I think the answer is yes, but let me just give a couple of specific caveats to that. So yes, any individual organization that meets the requirements of a seed grant can and should submit an application for seed grant, right? I think I want to just clarify what it means to be on a application for an impact grant. And there is one organization that we're going to be contracting with the My Brother's Keeper Alliance that the Obama Foundation will be creating a grant agreement with as a backbone through the impact grant. There are other partner organizations that organization can partner with, including your organization or other organizations that are potentially seed grants. And what that looks like in terms of dollars flowing one way or another will have less to do with other than sort of endorsing and evaluating the plan. So I think it is the decision of the lead organization that is applying to make determinations about sort of who else is there. But I will say those organizations that are applying as impact grants, I think it is a benefit to have this sort of built-in group of partners that are working, that are ready to sort of roll up their sleeves and work with you on some of that work. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Great.
So then the related one is we do the seed grant. I always think of seed grants as developing sort of new things that you'll then scale up. Our idea is to do something that will be some direct service, but because it's something that we want to align our model to research and blah, blah, blah. Our direct service numbers won't be as big as we would do on a regular direct service grant. That's how I'm thinking of a seed application, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to be judged down because we have low numbers on something that's basically building something.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I guess what I would say is this, is that especially I think for seed grants, but even for impact grants as well, we're not telling you all what minimum sizes are for populations that you're working with. It should be a size that's meaningful for the city and for your organization and for the subset of young people that you're working with, right? So if you're working with returning citizens from the age of 25 to 30, where we know that there are not enough opportunities for those returning citizens from the ages of 25 to 30, a lot of organizations cut off at 24. Like, that is a meaningful target population to work with. And even if the numbers are small, I think if it's meaningful and there's data to support what kind of impact that you can have, I think that is something that is a possibility. So I wouldn't encourage the size of the cohort to be the issue. I would frame it around what you're saying. This is the impact that it'll have. This is the meaning that it'll have. This is the innovation that we're trying to explore in this application.
Build in evaluation.
Yes. In the back, and then over here.
Beyond this competition, do you see this being a yearly competition in the future? And also, do you anticipate there be more opportunities for more organizations to potentially get funded in the future? And as it relates to the Obama Presidential Center, in regards to the new, the new Tiger Woods golf course that's going to be developed as well. I also am a professional golfer. I'm a former LPGA teaching professional. So my program also, I've taught over 2,000 inner city young kids how to play the game of golf. And I was wondering also through this competition, like what beyond this competition, how is it going to look for the future years to come?
Yep. That is
Can you tell Obama that I would like to play golf with him?
I'll start with the last one first. No, so to answer your, sorry, I didn't mean that as a no. If I see the president, I will tell him that you want to play golf with him. All right. Good. So I'll start with the first part is this going to be a regular competition? Are there going to be other opportunities in the future? I think the honest answer is I don't know as I sit here today, right? This is a pilot competition, right? This is our first My Brother's Keeper community competition. It was launched in direct response to what we were hearing from communities that were doing this work on the ground, which is, we need to know what works. We need funds to do it. We need a connection to each other. We need human resources, like all those things. This competition is an attempt to provide some resources to communities that are looking to do this work, right? So I would say at the foundation, we are a startup, right? We are essentially only a couple of years old. Our programmatic work has really only launched in the last 6 to 9 months. So I would say that this is a design test year. We're exploring different strategies. We know this is going to be our strategy for the next couple of years, but this is just the strategy that we've defined today. We're going to be iterating on that strategy. We're going to be exploring other ways to implement this work. We're going to be hearing feedback from communities that are doing this work on the ground and continuing to change and adapt to their needs as well. So I guess that's the first thing I'll say to this. As it relates to the Obama Presidential Center, clearly the Obama Foundation is, we are one program of the Obama Foundation, right? The Obama Foundation also has a series of programs around civic engagement, right? Where we're building the next generation of civic leaders that are going to improve not just our city, our country, but our world as well, right? So we launched the Obama Summit here in Chicago in October. It was a global summit, right? We've launched our first cohort of Obama Fellows that was announced about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We have a couple of Chicagoans in the mix, but we also have folks from around the world as well that are also Obama Fellows, right? We just launched our Obama Africa Fellows a couple weeks ago, right? So we have a series of foundations, we have a series of programs across the organization that are doing work. The other thing is we're building a big presidential center on the south side of Chicago, right? That is another big endeavor. We want this presidential center to represent not just the President and Mrs. Obama's journey, civic journey, but we also want it to be a place for folks across the world to go to, but folks in Chicago to access as well, for them to see their journey. We just announced yesterday that we're launching a branch of the Chicago Public Library as part of the Obama Presidential Center, as a continued way that we're integrating the community into what the vision of the Presidential Center is. So all that to say is that there are a lot of moving parts to what the Obama Foundation is doing. We are one part of it, but we want it to be fully integrated. So I want you to envision an Obama Presidential Center at some point in the future that is a thriving place where you'll have the branch of the Chicago Public Library there, where you might have My Brother's Keeper programs happening in that library or other parts of the Presidential Center. You might have civic engagement leaders gathering from around the world, having meetings there and learning about what's happening in Chicago and what they can take back to other, but also sharing what they're doing in their countries across the world around civic engagement. The Presidential Center will be drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors from across the world, as well as within our own neighborhoods here in Chicago. So there are a lot of moving parts to this. So I'm painting a picture for you that I hope you'll see that this is a part of what's going to make the Obama Presidential Center really live the vision that the President and Mrs. Obama have set for it.
Yes, I want to ask, in particular, the Base Chicago naturally has a parent organization, the Base in Boston. And so consequently, our programming is ready to be launched, but certainly we don't have the Chicago impact statements or outcomes. But our Base Chicago, certainly after our Base in Boston, has 5 years worth of data. And their mission is our mission with a little bit of tweaking, because we're more concentrated on college and we just want to get Chicago boys of color through the middle school and graduating high school. So is that something that I'm going to be taking a hit for, or how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think the question is, what if the evidence base of programming doesn't necessarily come from Chicago, but comes from another city? I think that's absolutely acceptable. I think part of what we want to do is encourage evidence-based programs to be adopted here in Chicago. So whether it's replicating one in Chicago that's already working and expanding it, or whether it's adopting an evidence-based program from another city, municipality, et cetera, that we could bring here to Chicago as well. Absolutely, but those are not, you're not going to get dinged for it. Like, we encourage that. That's part of exactly what we want to do as part of this. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask, it seems like the requirement between the grant, it seems that the seed grants are geared more towards younger, grassroots, small organizations or startup organizations. So I was wondering if like older or larger organizations have larger budgets that are sort of thinking about expanding programming or piloting certain programs that are being discouraged from applying to seed grants, or if there's
I don't want to discourage anyone from applying to a seed grant. I guess what I would say is that the seed grants are designed for, yes, all those things you mentioned, but also like folks that are doing work on the ground in communities, right? I think that's what we want to see. And like, some folks have been doing work in communities for a long time that maybe aren't, don't have, like, they're not at the backbone level yet, right? So I think I want to encourage any organization that meets the requirements of a seed grant to please apply for a seed grant, because I think that is where we're going to find those new programs. That is where we're going to find those expanding programs. If it's an organization that's been around for a long time, there will be a stronger evidence base of data on which to draw from. So I'm not discouraging anyone from applying to a seed grant. I'm encouraging everyone to apply. If you meet the requirements of seed grant, please apply.
How many can you apply for? Can you apply several times for the impact? If you have different ideas for different programs, can you apply for the impact grant, seed grant? How many of those can you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think for this purpose, we're asking you to pick one. This is going to be a very competitive process, and I think it's going to be hard enough for one idea and one organization to go through the grant process and sort of get picked. I would hate for people to dilute their ideas by coming up with a bunch of different ones. So I would just encourage everyone to, if I'm going to apply for an impact, I'm going to go all in on impact. If I'm going to apply for a seed, I'm going to pick my best idea, go all in on a seed grant.
I saw on the target population that it's anyone under the age of 30. Is there a specific age range within that that is a priority, or is it wherever your organization can make the most impact?
The age range that you see on the RFP, 30 and under, that's the age range. If you come back with mentoring efforts for early childhood, young men, like, we're going to review that, and anything within that delineation is fair game. Okay.
Thank you.
Have we answered all the questions? Is it possible?
I know you got a few more.
I used to be a teacher, so I'm okay with wait time.
This might be a preliminary question, but how do you see this program kind of expanding? Expanding either outside of just young men of color, looking at violence prevention as a whole, or have you even gotten that far?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I guess what I would say is that we recognize that there is a lot of work that is already being done in Chicago around both of these efforts, both mentorship and violence prevention. We don't think we have all the answers, and we don't think that we're the biggest, baddest organization doing this work. We want to be additive. We want to seed what's happening in the city. We want to contribute to what's happening in a way that's working in partnership and hand in hand with folks on the ground, et cetera. So what I hope that we're doing through this community competition is providing a real value add to organizations that are doing this work on the ground. I think Burnell mentioned earlier, we do have a platform at the Obama Foundation. I think we're happy to lift up work that's happening on the ground. We're happy to shine a spotlight on work that's happening on the ground, and we're happy to do it from behind the curtain, where we don't get the kudos or accolades, but we're actually lifting up organizations that are doing the work on the ground. I think that's what our vision is that work that's having a real substantive impact on boys and young men of color at the population level in the city will start to take hold, that will have multiple people pulling in the same direction, that will have a vision for where we want to go as a city around this work. And I think we want to help do that in whatever way we can. Jonathan in the back.
So my question is to do with the priorities, youth prevention, violence prevention and mentoring. Our organization, the work that we do, we feel like we make an impact in both those areas. Do you want us to highlight one or the other in the proposal, or focus on how they interact with each other?
Yeah, the question is organizations that do both mentorship and violence prevention, do you have to pick one, or do you talk about how both of them fit together? I think it's up to you. I think, I've seen mentorship programs that are also really strong violence prevention programs. And I've seen violence prevention programs that are also really strong, that have a really strong mentoring component. I don't think you have to pick one. I think you can talk about both. I think when we talk about this work, it's mentorship and or violence prevention, because we do see those as, you know, two pieces that work together. And again, because we've taken such a broad definition of both, you know, we do recognize that there are organizations that may be working in both spaces in a really effective way. Bernal, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, well, one, just to make things very clear, in the online application, there's a drop down that allows you to select either one or both. So it's possible for you to delineate that you're going to, you know, frame out an intervention around both. But I would just encourage organizations to get with your teams, get with your partners, and think really long and hard about how can we make the greatest impact, positive impact on boys and young men of color under the age of 30. And whichever way you land is where you should go.
Well, we'll stick around for a little bit afterwards, but I'm hoping that if there are any questions that you leave here with that you're like, I wish I'd answered, that you go to the type form and submit them. We will be answering them and posting them online as well. But I'll move on to sort of the last part of the presentation, which is the reminders and conclusions. Again, just a refresher on this. We did launch the RFP. We actually launched in early March, early April. You know, the submission technical assistance started April 10th. It will be running through May 10th, which will be our last webinar next week. Deadline for submission is May 24th. Again, on May 17th, that is the day we'll have all final FAQs posted on the website. And then competition winners will be announced in late summer. Just a word on evaluation. We will be doing some site visits to folks if you're sort of on the short list, especially around impact grants. So just recognize that that's happening. We're working through what that review process looks like, but it will be rigorous and fair and transparent as much as we can. Been looking to disperse funds in fall of 2018. Where to access help and support. I feel like we've talked about a lot of these, but I'll just go over them again. Again, the RFP is chock full of information. I showed you where to get information specifically about the Chicago application related to this. FAQs are available on the website. Those are being now updated at regular intervals. So if your question is not there, you've already submitted it, it will be up there. If you have a question, go to the FAQ first, see if it's already been answered. If not, submit it. Technical assistance webinars, all the recordings are available on our website, including this one will be available as well. And we'll have the final webinar next week. And then the final thing is submitting a question. You have the contact form. You know, this is a confidentiality clause. I'll let it speak for itself. And then the final piece is just a word from, you know, President Obama at the last National Summit, December 14, 2016. Both Bernal and I had a chance to be there. This is a national gathering where we brought together folks from across the country that are doing My Brother's Keeper work. And I think, you know, the president really doubled down that this is not just work that he did while he was at the White House. This is lifelong work. And even though we don't have 22 federal agencies, you know, even though he doesn't have 22 federal agencies at his disposal to sort of leverage to support boys and young men of color, we recognize that the work is happening in communities across the country, in neighborhoods across the city, you know, in your communities with our neighbors. And I think the work that we're doing today is an attempt to bring that vision into reality and to be able to continue that work. I'm going to see if this video works. If not, we'll just let it play. And hopefully it works. This is our PSA that we launched late last year called We Are the Ones. And it just shares a little bit about the way that we're looking at voices of young people in this work.
I want you to know you matter. There's nothing, not a single thing that's more important to the future of America than whether or not young people all across this country can achieve their dreams.
We are the ones to inspire our generation, to disrupt a broken system, to rise up, to take action and stand for the idea of opportunity for everyone. We are the ones to change statistics, not just for the sake of young men like me, but for the sake of America's future. Our future.
We're the ones to not give excuses, to not wait for permission to challenge biases. We just do. If they won't put our faces in their boardrooms, we won't put our faces in their stores.
We're the ones to act, to bring our unique gifts and talent.
To make sure America lives up to its grand ideals for our children and our neighbors' children. Because our futures are all tied together.
If there's no seat at the table, we'll bring our own.
We are the ones to encourage, to speak up, to stand out. I am my brother's keeper. We are the ones. I am my sister's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper. We are the ones. I am my brother's keeper.
Yo soy el guardián de mi alma.
I am my brother's keeper.
And I want you to be too.
Thank you, everyone.